I'd just like to welcome everybody here this afternoon. My name's Trevor Vaughan, I'm the Mayor of the town of Victoria Park. And thank you very much for coming. It's great to have so many people here for the Edward Millen Centenary celebration. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and Noongar people and pay my respects to their elders both past, present and future, where they hold the memories, the traditions and culture and hopes of Indigenous Australians. I'd like to extend a welcome to our special guest, Kate Doust, MLC for South Metropolitan, Mr Ben Wyatt, the member for Victoria Park. As yesterday Ben was sopping wet at a fete, today he's here to celebrate a century. The Mayor of South Perth, Sue Doherty, and Town of Victoria Park councillors, we have Councillor Hayes, we have Councillor Potter, we have Councillor Anderson, we have Councillor Valasa, and I think that's all of them. And of course Deputy Mayor John Bissett, who will be speaking in a moment. I'd personally like to thank the efforts of Nicola Tompkins in getting the event organised. This was a new event in the town's calendar. Nicola demonstrated overwhelming dedication and commitment to make the event happen in a short period of time. Where are you, Nicola? Down there? There she is. Give her a clap. Also, the efforts of Andrew McDonald in making the building ready for visitors. Yeah, we should give him a clap too. We are here today to celebrate the anniversary of the opening of the Rotunda Maternity Hospital 100 years ago. Two other historical buildings in the town celebrate their century this year, the Victoria Park Post Office and the Victoria Park Carlisle Bowls Club. Exciting day for the town as we launch, also on this day, we launch our written history, which is being sold over here, Beyond Madagarab, A History of the Town of Victoria Park, and that is a fantastic book, and we'll be launching that as well today. I haven't had a lot to do with the history of the town, only being here probably 30 years, and I've got lots of other people who have been 50 odd years, 60 years and 70 years. I'd like to introduce the Deputy Mayor, John Bissett, to come to the podium. John is the chair of the town's Written History Project team, chair of the ex-Local History Advisory Committee, member of the town's current Culture and Local History Working Group, and a passionate advocate for preserving the town's heritage and history. Come forward, please, John. John also is mentioned quite a bit in the book for a lot of his activities did while he was a councillor when the town first became a town within a council within itself. So thank you, John, and thank you for all your efforts. We look forward to your talk. Thank you.
Thank you. We should also mention Professor Bolton down here in the front row, who had a hand in the book. And there's also the ex-councillor, John McMillan, standing behind there. Hello, John. Now I'm going to go a little bit off script here. I've got a script here, but it's, you know, it's one of those things where you do a lot of work towards a project like this. Now, if you can just close one eye and imagine 5 years ago, this house was vandalised. Every wall within that house had graffiti on it. Every door had been smashed and all the fittings on the doors, which were those porcelain backplates, were stolen. People were discovered living in the house. There was a young couple. They even actually had a TV set up in the room where I think the video show is, of the trams is being shown today. Their comment to the people who found them say, look, well, just leave us here, we'll look after it for you. Well, unfortunately, every single wall was covered in graffiti. Luckily, there wasn't many foul language words. It was all artwork, and some of it was very good, but unfortunately, it was on our walls. Also, underneath the tiles, there were carpet tiles throughout the upper level. There was messages from the inmates in the psychiatric period where they were saying, "Oh, for God's sake, can I find the key to get out? And please, God, make me pass over." This has got history of joy and pain. Anyway, I better get back to this script. Good afternoon. It's a truly appreciate the significance of this fascinating building. I'd like to share a brief overview with you. The land the home sits on was bought and sold a number of times and was purchased in 1911 by Elizabeth Bailey, a nurse from Victoria Park. Mrs. Bailey built a maternity hospital, and we're still wondering how she built it. Here it is, a mansion. One of West Australia's first maternity care. It was opened in 1912. In 1919, the so-called Spanish flu epidemic hit Perth, and the hospital was taken over by the state government. In 1920, the Commonwealth Government took over the hospital for repatriation purposes. The hospital was named or renamed the Edward Millen Home in honour of the First Minister of Repatriation. In 1982, the Health Department took over the building and was used as a residential as part of the Child and Adolescent Psychiatric Division. In 2003, the state government transferred the ownership of the site to the town of Victoria Park. And here's where I go off key again. The city of Perth and the town of Victoria Park had been maintaining this ground for 40 years. We could have actually claimed it under adverse possession, but the state government of the day decided they'll give us this building. And that building there. This building was derelict, that building's derelict, and this one over here needs some repairs. And guess what? They didn't give us any funds to repair them. Anyway, that's another story. The building is on the town's municipal heritage inventory, the Register of Heritage Places, and is classified by the National Trust of Australia. The town is undertaking a master plan process that will determine the best uses of the site for the future, for many generations to come. The home is a fine example of a building constructed in the Federation Queen Anne style, which features include the Jarrah staircase. By the way, the Jarrah staircase, if you look very carefully, some of the staircase has been repaired. That was vandalised by some people. Pressed metal ceilings, and you've probably noticed we haven't actually tampered with them, they still need repairing. There's tiled fireplaces and stained glass. The stained glass. All the stained glass you see through the home on the front door was smashed to smithereens. They've been reconstructed. Luckily there's some photographs taken prior to the destruction of them. The beautiful building is not only a fine example of architecture, but it's a great example of how the community needs change over time with the influence of social change and world events. The building holds a special place in the hearts of some local residents, and the town is working on developing a plan which will benefit the residents. The rich history and sheer beauty of the home are things to be respected and celebrated, and the town aims to do so. When you wander through the house, just pause sometimes and just listen, and you'll get a feeling that this is an important place. It holds a lot of history. We've got the maternity hospital, returned soldiers from the First World War, returned soldiers from the Second World War. And this place here, which was built during the Second World War, if you actually crack off the lath and plaster on the building itself, you'll find the laths are made of metal, and printed on them is made in the USA. So most of that building was actually shipped here from the USA. We're very proud today to be launching the written history this afternoon. In 2008, a contract for writing the book was awarded to the University of WA Centre for West Australian History, and a Dr. Susanna Thompson was chosen as the author. The book is symbolic of the town's ongoing commitment in preserving the heritage of the area we live in. This would not have been possible without the financial contributions by the town and a grant received from Lottery West. Information for the book comes from many sources, particularly the town's written history collection. The collection is a rich source of material made possible with private donations and the generosity of individuals who are happy to share with us a piece of their history. As an aside, the town's local historian or history coordinator, Diana Wilson, welcomes any donation to the collection at any time. Thanks must be given to Professor Jeff Gallup, who wrote the foreword of the book. Beyond Matagara, A History of Victoria Park, is a narrative of the changing social landscape in Victoria Park, the story of its people and how they have lived and worked in the district. The book covers everything from pre-European settlement up until 2007. There are many people who must be acknowledged for their part in helping to complete this project. The elected members of the town of Victoria Park, both past and present. My fellow members of the past Local History Advisory Committee and current Written History Project team, including community representatives of Dr. Lindsay Hunter and Mrs. Natalie Esther. Elected members past and present, Councillor Hayes, Councillor Anderson and former Councillor Armstrong. And staff, Mrs. Jane McCann Marshall, Miss Diana Wilson and Miss Tina Ackerman, who are to be commended for their vision and perseverance in checking and rechecking from the beginning to the end. We must also note sadly the passing of Professor Tom Stannard, well-known West Australian historian and author who shared his expertise in the early stages of this book. The book is available for purchase here today and will be available at the library and the administration. If you want a copy, it's over here. I would like also to introduce Professor Jeffrey Bolton, who reviewed and commented on the book prior to it being published. Professor Bolton.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Deputy Mayor, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, if you're not able to hear me and you would like to hear me, wave your hands. Otherwise, I will press on regardless. Now, you may ask, what is a North Perth boy doing in Victoria Park? Let me start with an episode that happened to me a few years ago. I was asked to give an address at the chapel of the Christian Brothers College, Trinity College, just over there in East Perth. And as is customary, and as your mayor has done, I acknowledge the good work of the Noongar people over many centuries in their stewardship of the land. Afterwards, Archbishop Hickey took me aside and rather quizzically said, "Jeffrey, I enjoyed your address, but you do realise that all this was underwater when the Noongar were running the place. And it made me think, of course, the river has been a most important factor, perhaps the most important factor, in the way that the larger city of Perth has grown. And its particular importance for Victoria Park is because where Trinity College was, that was where there were the low-lying islands and the shallows of what is now Burswood, Harrison Island, and that was the best crossing place for the Noongar over many centuries. And the white people, when they came, followed the same pattern. The causeway was built in 1863, and then what happened was a very curious thing. In the region around East Perth, a suburb was starting to grow up by the name of Victoria Park. And that suburb decided it liked the other side of the river better and migrated. So that you may find the name Victoria Park on one or two very old maps, but essentially it is the region on this side of the river. Now, there's a significance about this. Those of you who have been to London will know that the more bohemian side of it, Southwark, the place where Shakespeare's Globe Theatre was, the place where Chaucer's Pilgrims set out, but it was always a place which was a little bit different, an alternative society. You think of Paris with its famous left bank. In Australia, there are not all that many capital cities with a decent sized river, but Brisbane has its south bank, which has again become the cultural centre. So I guess Victoria Park has been destined to stand in relationship to the city of Perth as the left bank does to these others. And although for some decades there was a well-meant but misguided attempt to amalgamate Victoria Park with the city, it's resumed its autonomy, and if anything comes out of the current proposals for the change in municipal boundaries, about which I express no opinion, then Victoria Park will survive as a name. However, it is a name with a history. The Aboriginal contribution has been given full justice in this volume. But for most of us, the memory goes back only to about the period of the gold rush. I think of an elderly relative of mine who was a market gardener over on this side of the river, and who at the age of 90, driving his horse and cart across the causeway, somehow fell off and recovered consciousness in Perth Hospital to find a nurse trying to cut away his trousers to see if he'd dislocated his hip, and he roared, "Unhand me, woman." Now that seemed to be a typical bit of Victoria Park spirit. I think of the way in which the homesick English developers of this region named so many of the streets after little towns in England, and particularly in the Thames Valley. I think, well before my time I hasten to add, of the fact that in 1907, when the 22 tram line was extended out to North Perth, that it was celebrated as a great treat for the North Perth State School children, that they should all be loaded into a couple of trams and brought out to see what it was like across the causeway and to go down Albany Highway into Victoria Park. No finer treat could have been thought of for these children. And then, of course, there were the decades when both North Perth and Victoria Park were consolidated. This is when, as Councillor Bissett has reminded you, a good deal of fine municipal building went on. There followed the 1920s. There were floods on the causeway in 1926 and again in 1945. And there was, of course, memorably, the Depression of the 1930s. And I can remember being told by old Sir Thomas Marr how his medical practice in Albany Highway had been the only one between Armadale and the causeway, having to serve that large area, next door to the state school, and he said that he knew that the Depression was over when the kids started throwing their crusts at lunchtime over the fence. So that's North Perth and Victoria Park. Suburbs such as those, the very bastion of the decent artisans, tradesmen, skilled workers, the people who make a city, the people who create the infrastructure on which everything else depends. Well, much has followed since then. The number 10 tram went in the 1950s. The Shepparton Road became a vital alternative highway, and even now we experience the traffic problems. But what has been impressive has been the way that the Victoria Council, local authorities and the people who work with them have looked after their past. They have not just let it go. And this is perhaps more significant than people realise, because when I was doing Australian history at school, there wasn't a bit about the sort of suburb where I was growing up. There were convicts, I didn't know any convicts. There were explorers, and I didn't know any explorers. There were shearers' strike. I don't think I knew any shearers, and my father would rather have died than go on strike, he being that sort of person. But nothing about the environment which we knew. And all that has changed. And over the last 20 or 30 years, Perth suburbs have come to be the source of a stimulating and interesting set of histories, which are the essential building blocks out of which the history of the state and the country can be built. And Susanna Thompson has worked very hard, very enterprisingly, with a magnificent use of newly available sources, not forgetting the photographic materials, and she has produced something which I can wholeheartedly and without reservations recommend everyone to get a copy of. Now, what do you do at launches? I don't want to seem sacrilegious, but I was once a student of Manning Clark, a name which most of you will have heard of. And Manning had a custom that when anyone presented him with a new book, he would look very serious, more serious than I'm able to. He would hold the book out in front of him and he would utter a benediction over it. So I utter my benediction and I declare this book launched. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the town of Victoria Park and the citizens of Victoria Park, I'd like you to present to Professor Bolton with a free copy of your book. Before we finish today, I'd like to quote from Professor Jeff Gallups' foreword. In many ways, the young man, John Stephen Marley, who jumped the gun and crossed the newly built causeway ahead of the governor and the official party in 1867, personifies the larrikin spirit of this district. The author captures it well and has written a history to read and enjoy. The book is now available for sale over here. Please go through the house. Please, I want to thank, before I leave, all the unsung heroes. I know we've mentioned some names, but there's a whole team of backroom workers. I think if you can put your hands together for those who actually brought all this together. Thank you. The mayor, if you want to come to stage.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Just well, great words, and it's nice to see you using the things that weren't necessarily in the writings, but your own experience. And Professor Bolton, thank you very much. As a student of history and lover of history, I've always respected you as a lecturer and your position as professor. So it's great that you can contribute to today. Thank you everybody for coming. It's I've just got to let you know there's some scones and refreshments over there, so please partake in that. And again, thank you. It's such a great building and such a great book, and it's fantastic that so many people could come along today. Thanks very much.